Hello, everyone, and welcome to HJP Financial Group's presentation on Social Security. I know it's everyone's favorite subject. Joining me tonight is another financial planner for the firm, Mark Petracca. So, fun topic, as always. Uh, I was trying to think of different analogies on what Social Security is like. Uh, Sadly, and I feel like this happens to me all the time. I always kind of related to gambling. If any of you ever played poker or kind of like Texas Hold'em back in the day, one of the things you're always just trying to do is push your chips into the middle with the best hand, the highest probability hand. That's all we can ever do. Now, as the cards get turned over by the dealer, your turn card in your river, sometimes someone gets lucky and you lose. That's just the reality of it. So when it comes to Social Security and when we're trying to help people, it's really just an understanding of what's your situation. We go through 5 or 6 main categories of things, and we try and say, well, based on all of these things, what is the scenario that gives you the highest probability of success? And what we measure success by is, did I live a long, fruitful life where I was able to reasonably stay on a budget that I've grown accustomed to? So we always have to plan for longevity. If that doesn't happen, that's life. If a different situation played out, of course, we would love to go back and figure out, maybe turn it on 62 or 64, whatever it may be. But again, all you can never do is just analyze your situation and just go with what is the highest probability. So looking forward to kind of going through all these Social Security 101s. Of course, if anyone has any questions, there's a little raise your hand feature. It should be at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to raise your hand and we can certainly have some dialogue. Of course, everyone has access to our email address and happy to set up a one-on-one and kind of go through your own personal situation. Sound good? Wonderful. All right, I'm going to share my screen and we'll just kind of walk through the presentation. So for today, I'm going to kind of go through Social Security 101, go through kind of the different benefits and options that are at your disposal, some strategies to consider, and then possible next steps to kind of utilize what you're going to learn today and how to implement to your own personal financial situation. But first, we'll start with a little bit of a story. So the lovely woman we're looking at here is Miss Ida Mae Fuller. So a little bit of history on Social Security. This really stemmed from the Great Depression. You obviously had a lot of people unemployed, elderly, can't work, and that's a problem when we're talking millions upon millions of people. So FDR kind of stepped in and rolled out the Social Security program, but they tried to pull a fast one. So in the year 1940, your average life expectancy was 60 years old, and Social Security kicked on at 65 years old. So congratulations, you'll get your Social Security 5 years after you're dead. But the very first person to ever receive it, Miss Ida Mae Fuller, as far as I know, it might be the greatest return on investment all of time. Apparently, she had put in to 2 payments of FICA. That's where you put into the Social Security system and then retired, at which point she was able to collect for 35 years. I'm sure she thought it was an unbelievably wonderful program that was rolled out. But that was a little bit of the history of the Social Security system.
Yeah, if you want to just take it back a step, just who is eligible for Social Security retirement benefit? So anyone who accumulated over 40 quarters of work, and you can earn 4 quarters in a particular year, um, you're eligible for Social Security benefit. Even though you have 10 years of work, your benefit's always going to be calculated based off of the highest 35 years of earnings. If you have any of years that would be considered like a donut hole that you weren't able to work in that year, or say you only have 30 years of work, those zeros are going to, just like it was when I was in school, any zeros you didn't have for a test grade is going to drop your average tremendously. So just be cognizant of that, and when you're about to enroll for or apply for Social Security. And then looking at the sustainability, by 2035, the payroll taxes will approximately pay for 83% of the benefits owed. Now, obviously, something needs to be done, but the solutions necessary aren't really politically palpable. And I'll let Mike kind of go on from there with that.
It's been 4 minutes, so I'm going to go off script already. So obviously the Social Security reality is a pretty hot button scenario in recent things that are playing out. The Trump administration, one of the things they promise is no longer taxation of Social Security. So to give us a little bit of a recap how we're at this point right now, the Social Security Trust Fund has about $4 trillion, and we're putting money into the system and taking money out. Now we're taking more money out that's being what puts in, which is causing the trust fund to slowly run dry somewhere in the next 5 to 10 years. At which point X happens. If I knew what X was, I wouldn't be here right now. This is my own 2 cents. We're coming up on trying to pass a tax bill. And so I just saw, I was looking at my Google feed, Trump said, stop trying to lower the Medicaid reality or cut spending to Medicaid. To Mark's point, it's kind of political suicide. You have Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. These are very hard things to politically try and cut because people don't like to lose benefits that they've received. And that's understandable. These things were promised to people for decades now, and then all of a sudden you want to cut them. The reality is we're $36 trillion in debt and running $2 trillion deficits. Something has to be done. When that happens, or when the so-called music stops, where it becomes a problem, you or I do not know. Could be in a year, could be in 30 years. But for all intents and purposes, when I'm trying to write financial plans, I absolutely factor it in. You know, I never would consider a situation, I don't think it's plausible of a situation for someone getting Social Security or within 5 years of about to receive Social Security to have those benefits cut or reduced or removed. Do I think someone in their 20s, 30s, and 40s might not have a full retirement age in their mid 60s, maybe it's closer to 70? Yeah. Do I think they'll increase the FICA taxes what people pay their payroll? Yeah. Do I think they'll actually cut benefits to people? No. Now, what Social Security will actually provide you, that benefit, I think, goes down. So what I'm talking about is we're running deficits, we're in debt, that's diluting the currency, that's going to trigger inflation. And the Social Security amount that you're going to get is not going to keep up with inflation. So it's going to be there. It's going to be the amount they say the amount. But where you used to be able to pay 50% of your budget, in 10 years it might be 40% of your budget, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's going anywhere. Who knows if they remove the taxation on Social Security? Seems insane to me since the system is already running dry. We're going to cut off a source of the revenue. But those are things as they play out, you adjust your plan. There's no point to hypothetical and run, you'll drive yourself crazy. So again, I absolutely think Social Security will be there, but because of inflation, it's going to have less of an impact than it had for people in the past.
So at full retirement age, you are actually entitled to your full primary insurance amount, or PIA. Anything prior to your full retirement age, you're going to have a discounted benefit. Now, everyone's FRA used to be age 65. And now it is a sliding scale moving up from age 66 for anyone born from 1943 to 54, up 2 months each year until your birth year of 1960 would be age 67 would be your full retirement age. And like I said earlier, your benefit amount is based off of mostly your earnings and how many years you worked. So we already mentioned the highest 35, but the earnings that you make later in your career are obviously going to bring up that average. So each year you delay while working, and having larger earnings is going to bring up that benefit amount. And then the age in which you are at your full retirement age will determine your PIA amount.
Yeah, just a quick point on this. we're not talking 20 bucks here, 40 bucks here. It listed out three things: age, earnings, and years of working. That getting to that 35 and the difference between someone having a salary of 50 grand or 150 grand is the difference of maybe getting $4,000 a month. I've seen some people have a total of 55,000 a year coming from Social Security. So, I'll see $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month, all the way up to about $4,000 a month. So there is a pretty wide dispersion of Social Security benefits. So when it comes to Social Security, we can turn on benefits anywhere between 62 and 70 years old. So between the ages of 62 and your full retirement age, Social Security is going to grow by about 7% a year. From your full retirement age till 70, it's going to grow by 8% a year. So the question becomes, do I take a lower amount earlier or a higher amount later? Let's run some numbers. So one of the first things we have to factor into the equation is our life expectancy. So obviously, as medications improve, medicine and technology, we're all living longer. So this is a way, I would say about 15 years ago when I was writing financial plans, I would normally run them till 90 years old. Now I run them to 95 years old. Doesn't mean you will live to 95, but as your financial planner, if you're 80 and pass away, you don't have a problem. But if you're 92 and broke, we have a very big problem. So I have to certainly plan for longevity as we're doing financial plans. So obviously, if we have situations where we're touching it earlier but lower or higher for later, there comes a point where they cross. That's kind of your break-even analysis. So depending on the age, 62, 66, or 70, would determine where the kind of the break-even point. To just put a round number on it, let's call it 80 years old. That's the point where they all kind of converge. So if you lived to 78 or 82, it was kind of tomato. Obviously, if God forbid you passed away at 72, certainly a humongous difference to turn it on early. If you live to 92, humongous difference. And by humongous, I mean like 6 figures of money difference between waiting to take it later as opposed to taking it early. So this is one of my favorite slides in the deck. So this says, all right, general public, when are people taking it? So statistically, we'll call it, let's say about a third take it early. The meat of the scenario, take it around your middle ages, 65 to 69, and then about 10% are taking it at 70. So this is one where I typically sit down with someone new and they say, well, my cousin's taking it at 63 and my cousin's really good with money. You don't have your cousin's finances or Bob from the office or somebody you know or some friend that's good. None of that's material. This goes for the investment world, the insurance world, the estate planning world, all of it. You live your retirement. You have your inheritance goals. You have the legacy things that you want to kind of pass on or do whatever you need to do, or you have a certain risk tolerance. Your planning approach should be 100% unique to you. It is completely indifferent to whoever's doing what and whatever their scenario. I can't drive that point home enough.
So working while taking your Social Security, if it's before your full retirement age, the Social Security Administration is going to withhold $1 for every two that you earn above and beyond the 23,400 mark. So, for instance, if we just say we earned 33,400 or 10 grand more than that threshold, you would have $5,000 withheld from that $10,000 difference. Then fast forward, if we were doing it at your full retirement age and that higher threshold of 62,160, same scenarios. Let's say we did 10,000 more than that. For the 10,000 more that we earn more than 62,000, the Social Security Administration will withhold about $3,333. And then right after your full retirement age, you can make as much as you like, $1 million or more. There is no negative implications to your benefit.
I would say 99% of the time, if you're working full time, I'm not telling you to turn on Social Security. Now, again, if the spousal benefit might come into play, or if you have young kids that would also be eligible, maybe in that situation. But for the most part, if you're working full time, it's pretty rare that I say, yep, go ahead, turn it on. Most of the time, the number says it doesn't make sense. Now, one other point that I also want to drive home, let's say you find yourself in this situation of thinking, oh, I'm going to work full time and take my Social Security, and they do withhold 10 grand from you. They don't keep it. They'll give it back to you, just spread out over the next 20 years. So not exactly the scenario you want. The whole point of turning it on early, where you're sacrificing a reduced benefit, was to get this money. Not only did you lock in a reduced benefit, that pool of money that you were hoping to get is just spread out over the next 20 years. So again, very rarely do I tell someone who's working full time to turn on their Social Security benefits.
All right. And the way that they determine if your Social Security benefit is taxable is using the provisional income, which is your modified adjusted gross income plus half of your Social Security benefit. And Mike, if you want to flip to the next page real quick or slide. So provisional income typically includes everything you see on the left-hand side right there, including if anyone is a municipal bond holder, the interest from a muni bond, which is, although there's no tax implications for earning that interest, there is going to be factored into, on the federal side, it is going to be factored into how much you earn and if your Social Security is taxable. Ones that are not included is the Roth IRA and anything from a life insurance benefit that is tax-free. You can go back to the original. Yep. So as you can see right here, it's pretty quick that it ramps up and becomes taxable. It's pretty easy to make 32,000 as a married couple or a single filer over 25,000, and even more than 44,000. So quickly you could see how fast your Social Security becomes taxable and up to the highest watermark as well.
So going back to the recent political environment and things that they could do to Social Security, the figures we were just showing you haven't been adjusted for inflation for decades. It's kind of a joke. Now, as we could tell, more than 44,000 of income is taxed at 85%. Now, again, just to be clear, the tax isn't 85%. What it's really saying is if you have, let's say, 10 grand of Social Security, 85% of it, or $8,500, gets added onto your taxable income. Let's say you're in the 25% or so bracket, roughly 2,000 and change would be the tax on your 10 grand. Now, one of the things that they can do, now, could I see them completely removing the tax on Social Security? No. Could I see them increasing those dollar amounts? So maybe it's up to 80 grand is not taxable. I get the point. Let's say someone's bringing home 300 grand in retirement. Yeah, maybe their Social Security should be taxed. But especially in New Jersey, it doesn't take much for someone to have a little bit of income. 60, 70, 80, 90 grand. All right, that's a little bit more reasonable. We'll see what kind of shakes out in front.
All right, switching it up a little bit on your spousal benefit as opposed to your own. If you were to apply for your spousal benefit anytime before your full retirement age, it's going to be at a discounted rate as well. But there is no benefit for delaying past your full retirement age, as opposed to your own working benefit. Every year that you wait past your 66th or 67th birthday, you have that 8% increase. That does not apply here at the spousal benefit. So the max you'll ever get is applying at your full retirement age, which would be half of the working or the higher earner spouse's benefit, and then discounted all the way up to about 35% less than the full retirement spousal benefit at age 62.
Yeah, so let's run through a quick example of that. Let's say person A is going to bring home 2,000 for Social Security at their full retirement age, and the spouse is going to bring 1,200. You're never going to go on your spousal benefit because you can't pick and choose. The Social Security office is going to give you the higher of the two when it comes to spousal benefit. So sadly, every once in a while, I'll run into someone who says, I took my spousal benefit at 62 and I'm going to take mine at 67. That's not how it works. Once you take one, you've deemed to take your Social Security, and again, you'll only ever get the higher of the two. And Mark made a very important point. Every once in a while, I cringe when I hear it. Someone saying, "Oh, I'm going to take my spousal benefit and I'm going to let it grow till 70." It doesn't. It stops your full retirement age. So if you're going to get spousal benefit, you turn it on at your full retirement age. A little different than the widower benefit, which we'll go over in a second. So now we're going to touch upon some strategies to kind of implement. Now I'm going to just I kind of want to focus on the big macro no-brainer ones. Obviously everyone's I can create and Mark can create some personalized one, but these are just, I just want to make sure the no-brainer ones get out there. If you're a couple, I've never come across a situation where I would tell the person with the higher of the two benefits to take it early and the lower benefits take it later. So for example, if you're the higher of the two, you want to delay taking it as long as possible. So if we're sitting there and both are the same age as 64 and one's going to get 2,000, the other one's going to get 1,000, and you're like, I want to turn on Social Security. All right, turn on the $1,000 one and let the $2,000 individual continue to grow. And the reason for that, if something happens to the person who's at 2,000, the other person becomes a widow, they would drop theirs and switch to take the higher of the two. So 99% of the time, if we're dealing with a couple, we're always going to be telling the person, hey, is yours the higher of the two? We want to delay. That doesn't mean delay till 70. That may be based on your own situation. One person turns it on at 62, the other person at 66. But we always want to push, if either of them are going to delay a little bit, the higher of the two. Now, widow benefits are a little bit different. So as I mentioned before, Social Security benefits are turned on between 62 and 70. Widows can actually turn it on a couple years earlier. They can turn it on as early as 60. The other things widow can do that no one else can do, they can do the switch. So our own mother was a perfect example. She turned on her widow benefit at 65 years old, continued to receive that, and we delayed taking her Social Security until she turned 70, and then we switched from the widow benefit to her own benefit now that it was maxed out. Again, you cannot do that with a spousal benefit, but you can do that with a widow benefit. Just know if you're in a couple, you are not making a standalone decision about your Social Security. It is absolutely a cohesive planning approach. I always cringe when someone just I want to turn it on because I think it's not going to be there. It's not really a good reason. It might be a factor into the situation, but it should be all based on your own personal reasons, your own personal finance. So again, spousal benefits is something to consider. Widow benefits are something to consider. If you were married for 10 years, you are also eligible for a spousal benefit. The famous example is Mr. Johnny Carson, who's married to 3 different individuals for more than 10 years each. All of them were able to claim a spousal benefit off of Johnny's numbers. It didn't impact him whatsoever. They just use it for the calculation. Now, these are some situations that we might tell people to turn it on earlier. Let's say you have young kids under 18 years old. They are also eligible for a Social Security benefit off of you if you're taking benefits. So, let's say your kid is 16, and so they'll get 2 years worth of benefits at 15,000 a year, but you have to turn on your benefits a little earlier than you want. Well, if the kids are going to get 15,000 a piece for a couple years, that's like 60 grand. That's a lot of money to make up. So now that break even point is no longer 80, it might be 83, it might be 84. So if you have young kids and they're able to get a benefit off you, it might be a reason to turn on your benefits early. If your spouse has reached their full retirement age and their benefits would no longer grow, well, now it might sense to turn on your benefits to allow the spouse to claim off you. They can't claim a spousal benefit until you've turned your benefit on. So again, some unique situations that can also play out. Okay, so you've decided to not listen to your cousin and what they're doing with Social Security, and you're going to come up with your own disciplined approach to how and when you're going to turn on Social Security. One of the first things we want to do is know your numbers. So we can do an easy Social Security analysis where we're just trying to play out all the scenarios. Where do the numbers come in at? So we more or less plug in your numbers, your spouse's numbers, and we plan for some longevity, and we run a scenario. Say, all right, well, what happens if we both turn it on at 62, both turn it on our full retirement age, both at 70, and then maybe a hybrid approach. Maybe the lower of the two turned it on at 63, and the higher of the two turned it on at 69. And we want to see, well, what is the lifetime benefits when we compare one versus the other? So like I mentioned before, your break-even point's around 80 years old. If you live till 90, we're not talking $20 a difference. It's a pretty big difference. So this is let's call it 1.1 and 1.4 and change. You know, what are we at? Almost $350,000 of difference. That's a lot of money to impact someone's finances. Now, and I'll go into that a little bit later. Now, again, these are the things you hope you don't skip over. So, in this hybrid situation, we're at 1.4, we're pretty close to maxing out compared to the 70-year-old. So sometimes the hybrid approach, you don't even have to sacrifice that much. But at least, again, step one, know your numbers and kind of know the comparison. Step two, when it comes to Social Security, we want to think about all the main important items. So, first and foremost, really, is your health. If you got a lot going on, you're on a lot of medications, maybe you're overweight, and the statistics of not living past 70, 75, yeah, it's probably going to make sense to turn it on. If you look at your family history, and a lot of times, your mom lived to 98 and her mom lived to 98, plan for longevity. Current markets. So let's take the last lovely roller coaster world of the tariffs and everything we've gone through and just understand where we are today. We're pretty close to all-time high, very expensive levels for US stocks. So this is where a lot of people would say, should I turn on my Social Security or should I start taking from my investments? Or our investments had a beautiful run. We're sitting at all-time highs at expensive levels. Let's take some profits from our investments and we'll look at Social Security continue to grow at 7 or 8%. It's certainly a factor. Same in reverse. If we're in the 2008 financial crisis, everything's gone killed. I say, I don't want to touch your investments at all. I'm going to let them rebound. Let's turn on Social Security. So markets have a big factor on when we turn it on. Your risk tolerance. So not so much now, but going back 10 years ago, I used to do a lot of arguing with people who are very conservative. Let's say they were a good saver. They got $1 million in the bank in a CD. 10 years ago, maybe that CD was paying you 1%. So I don't want to touch my CD earning 1%. I'm going to turn on Social Security, which is growing at 8%. It doesn't make a lot of sense. If you plan for longevity and you just look at both of those things as assets, don't think of it as an income stream and one is a pool of money. They're both assets. They both have one job, provide you with an income to sustain your retirement. So if you look at it through those lenses and we say, well, if one's going to grow at 1 and one's going to grow at 8, I'll probably want to turn on the 1 before I touch the 8%. So your risk tolerance is having a factor. Now, less so today because, interest rates are higher, uh, but you should be thinking about that as we're making these decisions. Like I mentioned, if you have a spouse, this is a joint decision. So protecting the spouse benefit, the widower benefits is a big, big factor on when we're turning on Social Security. Your retirement assets. If you're sitting here with 2, 3 million bucks and you got a reasonable budget and we got Social Security coming in and you have a normal retirement age, you've won. You've bought yourself the flexibility of choice. So you don't have to do the exact 100% right thing or highest probability thing. You can hedge your bet a little bit. You can be a little bit off because you have a nice nest egg behind you that, hey, if you made the wrong decision, well, you're not going to outlive your money. Now, if you're tight and based on your pool of money, your budget in retirement is going to be close and you're trying to scrape every last penny, that's certainly a factor and probably a reason you should delay a little bit. And all of these things really just focus on the Social Security reality. So one, know your numbers. Two, we go through these 6 items we have here, which leads us into our cash flow. So as of right now, we've said, all right, based on all the information, we believe turning it on at 63 for me and 66 for my spouse is the right plan of action. Well, beautiful. Now let's prove it. That's when you go into your cash flow. And everyone, yes, everyone on this call has gone through cash flow with me and in our firm. So in essence, what we're trying to see is, all right, let's plug in all of our incomes between pensions and how long we're going to work and when we're going to turn on Social Security. And we try and see, do the numbers work? So we say, all right, based on when we're going to turn on Social Security and when we're going to retire, all right, we got our income flows, we got our distribution from our investments. This is the lifestyle we're trying to grow with our expenses. Do we have enough pool of money that we don't run dry? And in this hypothetical example, and it's always a little bit tougher when the two people's ages are far apart. We have a situation, person one is 93, okay, they made it to the so-called promised land. The other person is 84 years old and oh crap, we ran out of money. So we have to kind of start back in the beginning because at the end of the day, the numbers have to work. So whatever Social Security you want to do, that's great. But between your budget, when you retire, when you do part-time, how much risk you're taking in your investments, these are the dials we get to play with, but we have to have a situation where the black gets all the way till the end. And once we do that, beautiful, we've checked all the boxes, we could call it a day. But that is proper Social Security analysis. Do your homework, get some education, know your numbers, think about all the possible factors to make the decision, come to what you think makes the most sense, plug it into your cash flow, and make sure the numbers work. You do that, going back to where I started, you've put your chips into the middle with the best probability of winning. If it doesn't play out, it doesn't play out. But you can put your head on your pillow at night knowing that you made the best educated decision possible. Any questions, always feel free to reach out. Awesome. I hope everyone has a wonderful night, a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. We are always here if you need us. Thank you so much, everyone. Have yourself a great night.